Welcome to the Slight Consulting IT and Developer Training Program on the UAE E-Invoice mandate. Over the next 24 slides, we'll walk through everything your engineering team needs to ship a compliant integration, the standards, the architecture, the APIs, and the testing approach. This module is built for the people who write the code, configure the ERP, and own production support. If you're a finance or tax stakeholder, you'll still get value, but expect us to spend time on XML schemas, certificates, and webhooks rather than accounting treatment. Let's start by setting expectations for what you'll know by the end. 3 outcomes we're aiming for. First, you'll understand the PINT-AE format and the 5-corner DCTC architecture, what each piece does and how data flows through it, including the tax data document and message-level status protocols. Second, you'll know how to integrate your ERP or application with an accredited service provider, the patterns, the REST APIs, the webhooks, and the mandatory field mappings. Third, you'll be able to design, test, and validate a compliant implementation against the phased timeline running through 2026 and 2027. Each of these maps to a module in this deck. We'll start with format and standards, then move into architecture, integration, and finally testing and go live. Let's begin with Module 1. Module 1, Format and Standards. Before we touch any architecture or APIs, we need a shared vocabulary for what an e-invoice actually is in the UAE context. 3 slides in this module. The system view of e-invoicing, the layered format stack from UBL through PINT-AE, and the document type model that governs the 16 invoice scenarios. Foundational concepts, bear with us, the payoff comes in the later modules. Start with the mental model shift. An e-invoice is not a document. It's a structured data exchange. 3 things to internalize. 1. It's XML, not PDF. Every field is named and typed, parsed by machines, not eyes. A PDF can ride along for humans, but it has no legal standing as the invoice. 2. It's validated 4 times at your system, at your ASP, on the PEPPOL network, and at the FTA. Any one of those can reject it, each with its own error code. 3. Every send triggers 2 paths simultaneously: the commercial path to the buyer's ASP and the tax reporting path to the FTA. 1 send, 2 flows. Keep that dual path model in mind, it shapes everything else we'll cover. Next, let's look at the format stack that makes the XML work. PINT-AE didn't appear out of nowhere. It sits on top of 3 earlier layers. Layer 1 is UBL 2.1. the Universal Business Language Standard from Oasis. That's the XML syntax and the namespace tree. Layer 2 is the European EN 16931 semantic core, the meaning of each field, independent of syntax. Layer 3 is PEPPOL PINT, the international extension that adapts PEPPOL BIS for non-EU jurisdictions. And Layer 4 is PINT-AE itself, the UAE customization published by the Ministry of Finance on June 19, 2025. PINT-AE adds the UAE-specific fields you'll care about as a developer: TRN, TIN, scenario type codes, VAT group handling, free zone indicators, margin scheme, self-billing. Around 50 mandatory fields in total. When you build the XML, you're building all 4 layers at once. Now let's look at what types of documents you'll actually send. 3 document classes, 16 subtypes in total. Tax invoices are the biggest bucket, 12 subtypes covering standard supplies, reverse charge, zero-rated, deemed supply, exports, free zone, margin scheme, self-billing, and more. Each subtype is identified by a scenario code in the XML, and your code needs to set that correctly per transaction. Commercial invoices are a single subtype for out-of-scope transactions, no VAT charged, but still transmitted and reported for traceability. Tax credit notes have 3 subtypes and must reference the original invoice via BT25. That linkage is mandatory, so your credit note workflow has to carry the original invoice number and issue date forward. 16 scenarios sounds like a lot, but most businesses only use 3 or 4. Map yours early. That closes Module 1. Now let's look at the architecture underneath. Module 2, Technical Architecture. This is the longest module because it covers the moving parts that the FTA and OpenPEPPOL have specified together. 5 slides ahead, the DCTC model itself, the 5-corner flow in detail, the AS4 transmission protocol, and the PEPPOL PKI that secures it, the SMP and SML discovery layer that does the routing, And finally, the tax data document and message level status protocols that handle reporting and acknowledgement. Once you've got these, everything else in the deck is just APIs on top. DCTCE, Decentralized Continuous Transaction Control and Exchange. Let's unpack each word. Decentralized. Unlike Saudi Arabia's Zakka model, the FTA does not pre-clear invoices. They flow business to business via ASPs, and the FTA receives a parallel report. Continuous. Every transaction is reported in near real time via a tax data document, not in a monthly batch. There are two parallel flows. The commercial flow moves XML from your ERP through your ASP across the PEPPOL network to the buyer's ASP and ERP. The tax flow has each ASP send a TDD straight to the FTA. Critically, your ASP is your single integration point. They handle schema validation, PKI, AS4 wrapping, discovery, reporting, and acknowledgement. You don't talk to the network directly. Next, we'll look at the corners in detail. The 5-corner model labels every actor in the flow. Corner 1 is your ERP. It generates .ae XML and pushes it to corner 2, your ASP, via REST API or SFTP. Corner 2 validates, signs, looks up the buyer via SMP and SML, wraps the message in AS4, and transmits to corner 3, the buyer's ASP. Corner 2 also sends the TDD to corner 5. Corner 3 validates again, sends an MLS acknowledgement back to corner 2, and delivers to corner 4, the buyer's ERP, possibly converting format on the way. Corner 3 also reports a TDD to corner 5. Corner 5 is the FTA e-billing system. It receives TDDs from both corner 2 and corner 3, but it does not sit in the commercial path. When you're debugging a failed send, knowing which corner reported the error is half the diagnosis. Now let's look at how corner 2 and corner 3 actually talk to each other. ASPs talk to each other over AS4, an OASIS messaging standard, SOAP-based, asynchronous, point-to-point. AS4 handles packaging, delivery receipts, retry logic, and error signaling between ASPs. Underneath AS4 sits the PEPPOL PKI, a public key infrastructure where every accredited ASP holds a certificate issued by OpenPEPPOL. The sending ASP signs every message with its private key. The receiver verifies it against the public key in the PEPPOL directory. That gives you message integrity and non-repudiation. For the UAE specifically, Ministerial Decision Number 64 of 2025 layers additional requirements. ASPs must hold ISO 27001 certification, carry UAE local insurance, and sign a service provider agreement with the Ministry of Finance. As a developer, you won't touch AS4 or PKI directly, but you will see their fingerprints in error messages from your ASP. Now let's look at how the network actually routes invoices to the right ASP. PEPPOL has no central directory of who can receive what. Instead, it uses a two-tier dynamic discovery system. The SML, Service Metadata Locator, is a DNS-based route operated by OpenPEPPOL. It maps every participant ID to the URL of that participant's SMP record. The SMP, Service Metadata Publisher, is maintained by each buyer's ASP and publishes the document types and AS4 endpoints that buyer can receive. The flow in practice: your ASP hashes the buyer's participant ID, queries the SML over DNS, gets back the SMP URL, fetches the SMP record for the .ae document type, gets the buyer's AS4 endpoint and certificate, and opens the connection. 5 steps. If anyone fails, typically because the buyer isn't registered yet, you'll get a discovery error. That's a very common one to handle gracefully in the early phases. Next, the reporting and acknowledgement flows. 2 more acronyms that show up everywhere. The TDD, tax data document, is a structured subset of the invoice reported to corner 5. It carries participant IDs, header data, tax amounts, VAT breakdown by rate, and the scenario code. It is not the full .ae XML, just the tax-relevant slice. Both ASPs send a TDD. Corner 2 sends on transmission. Corner 3 sends after successful delivery. The FTA gets dual reporting and can cross-check supplier output VAT against buyer input VAT in near real time. The MLS message level status is the acknowledgement layer. Corner 3 sends and mills to Corner 2 confirming receipt. Corner 5 sends and mills to both ASPs confirming TDD processing. MLS responses carry accepted or rejected plus a structured error code. Your ASP API will surface those error codes, schema failures, business rule failures, network failures, FTA rejections. Build your error handling around those categories. That wraps up the architecture. Module 3 turns it all into code. Module 3 Integration Patterns. This is where we get practical. 6 slides ahead. The 3 main ERP integration patterns, the roughly 50 mandatory .AE fields and how to map them, the structure of the XML document itself, how participant identifiers and TINs work in practice, what to look for when evaluating an ASP, and the typical ERP to ASP API patterns you'll be coding against. By the end of this module, you should have a clear picture of the actual build work. 3 integration patterns to choose from. Pattern 1, Native ERP Output. Your ERP, typically SAP, Oracle, or Microsoft Dynamics with a UAE module, generates .AE XML directly and posts it to the ASP API. Lowest latency, fewest moving parts. But you depend on the vendor's module being available and current. Pattern 2, Middleware. MuleSoft, Azure Logic Apps, or a custom Java or Python service takes whatever your ERP emits and transforms it to .AE before calling the ASP. Most flexible, best for multi-ERP or multi-entity environments. But you own more code. Pattern 3, ASP-hosted connector. An agent or plugin sitting near your ERP doing extraction and transformation for you. Fastest to deploy, ideal for SMEs. But you're tied to the ASP's roadmap. Pick based on ERP, volume, and team capacity. There's no universally wrong answer, but there is a wrong answer for your specific shape. Next, the fields you need to populate. The UAE MOF Mandatory Fields Guide version 1.0 from February 2026 defines around 50 mandatory fields. They group into 4 families. Party and identifier fields, seller TRN, seller participant ID, buyer name, buyer VAT ID for B2B tax invoices. Participant ID scheme is 0230, and the TIN is the first 10 digits of the corporate tax TRN. Invoice header fields, invoice number, issue date, tax point date, type code, plus the customization and profile IDs that identify .AE. Tax and amount fields, total tax, taxable amount, amount due for payment, plus per line VAT category code and rate. Reference and evidence fields, for credit notes. The preceding invoice reference is mandatory. For exports, the customs declaration number. For disclosed agent, both principal and agent TRNs. For self-billing, the agreement reference. Cross-reference every transaction type you ship against this map. Now let's look at the XML container itself. Quick tour of the XML. Root element is invoice in the UBL Invoice 2 namespace, with CAC and CBC namespaces for aggregate and basic components. Customization ID is the PEP-POL BIS Billing 3.0 URI. Profile ID is the .AE URI. Those 2 identifiers tell every downstream system how to validate. The top-level sequence is fixed, customization ID, profile ID, ID, issue date, due date, invoice type code, then parties, delivery, totals, lines. Order matters. UBL is positional. Key multiplicity rules. At least 1 invoice line, exactly 1 tax total, 1 tax subtotal per distinct VAT rate. Amounts to 2 decimal places in AED, dates in ISO 8601. If you send in a non-AED currency, the tax total must still be expressed in AED. Schematron will catch violations. Run pre-validation in CI before you ever hit the ASP. Up next, the identifier that routes everything. The TIN, tax identification number, is the routing key for the entire network. For corporate tax registrants, it's the first 10 digits of your corporate tax TRN. Businesses not required to register for corporate tax, but in scope for e-invoicing register separately with the FTA to obtain one. The PEP-POL participant identifier format is scheme :identifier. The UAE scheme code is 0230. So a participant ID looks like 0230 10-digit TIN. Your ASP registers your ID in the SMP at onboarding. An important edge case. In VAT groups, every legal entity uses its own TIN, not the group representatives. Intragroup transactions get a 24-month reporting grace period from January 1st, 2027. To send to a buyer, your application passes their 0230 ID to your ASP API. If they're not yet on the network, you'll see a discovery failure, common in the early phases. Next, how to choose the ASP that does all of this for you. Your ASP is the single biggest dependency in your stack. Choose carefully. 3 evaluation buckets. Accreditation. Verify MOF status on MOF.gov.ae. Article 15 pre-approval versus Article 16 full accreditation matter. Plus a valid OpenPeple PKI certificate, ISO 27001, and AS4 connectivity certification. Ask for documentation, not self-reports. Integration capabilities. REST API with an OpenAPI spec, support for your ERP, webhook support for async events, SDKs in your language, a sandbox with full schema validation, sensible rate limits. Operational and SLA. 99.9% uptime minimum, sub-hour P1 response, UAE data residency, 7-year archiving included, support for all 16-pint AE scenarios. Run a real proof of concept in their sandbox before signing. Paper specs lie, sandbox traces don't. Now let's look at what that API actually looks like. Typical ASP API shape. Submission post to /invoices, multi-part with the XML payload and metadata. Synchronous response is 202 accepted with a transaction ID, or 4XX with structured validation errors. Status polling. Get /invoices/ID/status. For transitions through submitted, validating, transmitted, delivered, FTA_reported, and rejected. Better than polling. Webhooks. Modern ASPs emit invoice_delivered, invoice_rejected, FTA_accepted, FTA_rejected, and MLS_received events with HMAC signed payloads. Your handler validates the signature, acknowledges with 200 OK, and processes idempotently. Error handling. Classify into schema errors, business rule errors, network or transient errors, C5 rejections, and discovery failures. Each has a different retry strategy. Schema errors mean fix data and resubmit. Network errors mean exponential back-off. Discovery failures mean the buyer isn't onboarded yet. That closes Module 3. The final module is how you prove it all works. Module 4, Testing and Go Live. You've got the format, the architecture, and the integration plan. Now we turn it into a working production system on a deadline. For slides in this module, the official phase timeline, a 3-stage testing strategy, an IT readiness checklist you can use as a tracker, and the 3 key takeaways you should leave this module with. For dates to anchor your plan against. July 1st, 2026. Voluntary pilot opens to any business that meets the technical requirements. This is your live test window with real invoices and real partners. January 1st, 2027. Phase 1 mandatory for businesses with annual revenue at or above 50 million dirhams. The ASP appointment deadline for this group is October 30th, 2026, extended from July 31st per the MOF update of May 10th, 2026. July 1st, 2027, Phase 2 mandatory for businesses below the 50 million threshold. ASP appointment by March 31st, 2027. October 1st, 2027, Phase 3 mandatory for government entities, also with a March 2027 ASP appointment deadline. Government implementations tend to need additional procurement-specific fields. Build in extra runway. Wherever you sit in the schedule, work backwards from your date, and treat the pilot as part of the critical path, not optional. Next, how to actually test. 3 test phases. Phase 1, schema and unit tests. Validate every XML output against the official Pint AE schematron rules offline. Check all mandatory fields. Test each scenario subtype you use. Confirm BT23 and BT24 carry the right URIs. Run all of this in CI on every build. Phase 2, ASP Sandbox. end-to-end. Submit through the Sandbox API, confirm 202 accepted with a transaction ID, confirm webhook delivery for delivered and FTA accepted events, test credit notes referencing Sandbox invoices, and deliberately trigger rejection cases, invalid TRN, wrong type code to verify your error handlers. Phase 3. Pilot in live production from July 1, 2026. Real invoices, real trading partners. Confirm SMP discovery, TDD acceptance, MLS handling, and archiving. Monitor the ASP portal daily. The pilot is the only place you'll see real-world edge cases. Use that window. Next, the readiness checklist. For readiness areas to confirm before your deadline. Format and schema, your ERP or middleware generates valid Pint AE XML for every scenario you actually use, with collision-free invoice numbering and schematron validation in CI. ASP integration. Contract signed with a full Article 16 accredited ASP. Sandbox tested end-to-end. Webhook handler deployed with idempotency and HMAC validation. Retry and dead letter queues in place. Master data, your own TIN and participant ID confirmed and registered. Customer TRNs and TINs stored. Buyer participant IDs cached for active B2B partners. VAT rate mappings reviewed. Operations and monitoring, portal access for finance and IT, a daily rejection monitoring process, month-end reconciliation against the ASP log, archive access verified for 7-year UAE resident retention, and an incident escalation path with a P1 SLA. If you can tick each of these honestly, you're ready. Now let's close with the 3 things to remember. 3 points to take with you. 1. Pint AE XML is the legal invoice. After your deadline, only Pint AE XML transmitted through an accredited ASP is a valid B2B tax invoice in the UAE. PDFs don't count. Design your integration to produce the XML natively and pre-validate with schematron in CI. 2. Your integration point is the ASP API. You don't implement AS4, SML, SMP, or TDD generation yourself. Your responsibilities are valid XML, correct API calls, webhook handling, MLS error processing, and your own participant ID registration. 3. Start now. If you're in Phase 1, your ASP appointment is due October 30th, 2026 and go live is January 1st, 2027. Realistic integration is 12 to 24 weeks. The pilot from July 1st, 2026 is your live testing window. Miss it and you go live blind. Thank you for joining this module. Your next step is the IT readiness checklist on slide 23. Use it as your tracker.